Okay, welcome back. Today's lecture topic will be the Big Five personality model. So we'll look at this personality model, which I've found to be very useful for my own personal life. And then we'll also talk a little bit about some of the things you could use to understand the model as well. Okay, so let's move it along real quick. So just a bit of a background, the Big Five personality model has been worked on since the 1980s. There are five major components. They're broken down into two categories, okay? And this will help you to classify your own personality traits or someone else's. And particularly as a teacher, I do find it's quite useful when I'm dealing with students to better understand which aspects of personality that they are exhibiting. And so there's a really good acronym there at the bottom, OCEAN. And as we can see, it stands for openness to experience, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Okay, so before we get into that, first we're going to have to talk a little bit about percent versus percentile. So percent should be a very well understood concept. Hopefully, you looked at this in math by the time you're watching this video. So on the left we have percent. So you get 50 students in a class, you get 65 out of 100 questions correct. Your percentage is 65%. Okay, if we look at that same classroom with 50 students in the class, where your 65% was rank 15, meaning you scored better than 35 other students. So we take the amount of students that you scored better than, divided by the total amount of students, multiplied by 100, which gives us 70. Okay, meaning you were 70th percentile. This means that 70% of the students scored less than you. Okay, meaning that 30% of the students scored more than you. Okay, so hopefully that's a very quick, easy lesson on percentiles, because again, this presentation is going to go into some numbers and it's going to talk about percentiles, not percentages. Okay, the way this test works that we're going to look at here, the rankings that you get are based on where you would stand in a, if you were placed on a line with 100 people, where would you stand? 10th percentile, 50th, 75th, 100th. So let's look at our first aspect here. So we have openness to experience. So I myself am very high in openness to experience, and the first sentence here we have, so the primary dimension of creativity, artistic interest, and intelligence. So verbal intelligence in particular. But it's also an interest in novel, new things, whether it's information, experiences, or just whatever is new, right? Especially people who are high in openness to experience, they're always looking for new things. A bit of the abstract ideas as well, so maybe philosophy or this appreciation of beauty. So, I mean, you can even see I have a painting hanging up in my room, in my classroom. I have a lot of posters, a lot of things I'm interested in. They're on my walls as well. Last sentence there. So people who are very high in openness to experience are not well adapted to and do not do well in situations or occupations that are routinized and predictable. So this is something that I definitely struggle with at times too, and part of why I really like teaching is it's always new things happening, particularly with the people. Okay, I'll explain some of my other traits as we get there. Sure, the material can get a little old, repetitive, and boring, but the openness to experience helps because I'm always constantly learning and I'm open to new ideas and I'm learning new things, which I find helps quite a bit. So let's move on. So openness to experience breaks down into intellect and openness, okay? And so as we'll see on this slideshow, on the left side will be the first trait and on the right side will be the second trait, okay? So if we see intellect, so intellect is a measure of interest in abstract ideas, not intelligence, which is one aspect of openness to experience. The way I understand this in practicality is intellect is really your interest in philosophy. Let's say, questions like, why are we here? Why do we exist? What is the meaning of life? These type of things are people who are high in intellect enjoy talking about. Okay, they want to have this discussion. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they're any smarter. It simply means that they're interested in having the discussion of, well, why are we here? What are we doing here? How do we solve problems the best? What problems are worth solving? So on and so forth. Openness, on the other hand, is basically, you can understand it as creativity, whether it's actual expression of creativity or even just the appreciation for creativity and art and whatnot. So very open, creative people love beauty. They require an outlet for their creative ability, or they cannot thrive. They need to be surrounded by art or beautiful crafts, measuring the response to beauty, creativity, and art. That is the job of openness. So again, I rank fairly high on all of these. I unfortunately don't have my numbers on hand, but I do rank very high in all three of these. I think my intellect was around 70 percentile, and openness was well above 80. So I really like art. I really like beauty. I'm very interested in these things. Intellect as well. Like I enjoy my conversations on, how did the universe come to exist, and what are we doing here? But I certainly know how to have conversations just about anything and whatever. So my 70th percentile allows me to experience both sides a little bit more so than someone who is on the very high end, let's say 99th percentile. Moving on here to the next trait, conscientiousness. This is another trait that I rank fairly high in. So first sentence, it's the primary dimension of dutiful achievement in the big five. Okay, so people who are high and conscientious, they know what they're supposed to be doing and they get after it. Okay, so they know, like, hey, I got schoolwork to do, I got questions to answer, I got math to practice or research for another essay, whatever it is, they know what they're supposed to be doing. And people who are high in conscientiousness are the ones who get after it, right? This really distinguishes them from people in low conscientiousness who might be aware of what they're supposed to be doing, but simply won't do it, right? So, we see words like dutiful, hardworking, people who dislike wasting time. They don't make excuses. They're organized. They're neat, decisive. The second half there relates more to the other aspect of conscientiousness, which we'll look at shortly. Yeah, so particularly in the classroom setting, you'll see students who aren't very conscientious, and they won't get their work done. Maybe they're the kids who are handing things in, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks late, right before the end of the semester. And they'll come up with whatever excuses, but the reality is they probably are low in conscientiousness. It's probably not school probably isn't the only area in life where they struggle to, get things done on time, to get, to self-motivate themselves to get after their work. It can be a bit different with work, especially, if you're in an environment where your boss can, just tell you the truth and say it with honesty. You might feel a little more obligated to do your job because it also pays bills. But let's say someone low conscientiousness, they set the goal of like, well, I want to start going to the gym and I want to go 3 times a week, and they end up going once every month, right? So we'll get into this. So conscientiousness breaks down into industriousness and orderliness. So industriousness is that hardworking aspect, right? People who are high in conscientiousness have the awareness, but the industriousness is what it's actually getting things done, right? So people who are very high, I have some students like this, and these kids are always they are asking me like, hey, I'm done my social studies. Can I go get my chemistry? Can I go get my math? Hey, can I go get my laptop so I can do this thing online? Can I put this stuff away and get something else? It's gotten to the point where I just tell them like, hey, like I know that you are organized and you're disciplined and you're also trustworthy. I can trust you to leave the room and come back and do your thing, right? And fortunately, they don't take advantage or abuse the system. And part of it is that conscientiousness, industriousness, where they know that it's like, hey, I have work I need to get done. I have a goal in mind, a plan in mind. Like I want to get my diploma. And I want to do something after school's over, right? So that's industriousness. Orderliness is related to cleanliness almost, right? It's a discussed sensitivity, and I do harp on this quite a bit in my social studies classes, that particularly when we're talking about the Nazis and whatnot, or genocide, right? The discussed response can be weaponized, right? You can use it against a group of people and in a malicious way. But orderliness is, and you might not be able to tell with my room kind of being a bit messy, orderliness is also, just keeping your room and your space clean, keeping your house clean, taking care of like basic hygiene, right? So people who are very, very, very low in orderliness, they might not even see a reason in showering every week, right? Or every 2 weeks, right? Whereas most people are kind of showering every 1 to 3 days, right? Or depending on what they're doing, right? Hygiene of brushing your teeth or just maintaining your appearance. Which, again, look at my hair. I mean, who am I to say anything about that? But there's a plan up here. That's what's going on. So that's orderliness, right? It can also, the other aspect is maintaining and staying on schedule, right? Like I have a part of that as well with myself, but I sometimes just get bored of schedules. Like I'm very high in openness and I like new things. But careful management and routine. Like I know a lot of students who are very orderly. It's like they have their planners, they have their routine, they know when they're going to do certain things, and they're busy. They're busy kids, right? And they need to do that. Moving on to extroversion. This is a aspect which I rank very high in, about 96 percentile, although in the few years since I've taken this test, I do believe that, most likely my extroversion's gone down. I find it much easier to stay indoors. But key point here is that with this big five understanding, extroversion isn't just like being out of the house. Extroversion is the dimension of positive emotion in the big five. Okay, so people who are very extroverted rank high in extroversion. They're going to feel positive emotions such as hope, joy, anticipation. They're looking forward to socializing and looking forward to good things happening and feeling good. They can also be enthusiastic, talkative, assertive. They're willing to socialize. It does still focus on socializing, but I almost look at it as like high extroversion is like the ability to just put yourself out there, right? And if you have high openness like I do, like you're really out there, right? You'll go and talk to people, you'll try new things, and you'll feel good about them generally. And it does have its downsides as well. We can kind of look into that. So extroversion breaks down into enthusiasm and assertiveness. So enthusiasm, it's pretty self-explanatory with the word. I mean, and I deal with students who are, it's hard, I mean, they say they're depressed, and I, to an extent, wouldn't doubt it, but for sure I deal with students who are just low in enthusiasm. They just have no real positive emotion, no positive outlook for what's going to happen next, or no eagerness about life, which is quite sad, but, I mean, low enthusiasm exists for a reason. The fact that it exists suggests that there was some sort of benefit, biologically speaking, to having low enthusiasm. And I mean, I don't know at the moment, but I'm sure that reason exists. You have assertiveness, which is your willingness to take charge. This is another thing that I rank high in, and I notice this more and more in social situations. I feel like my assertiveness has gone higher. But the will, again, that idea of putting yourself out there and how willing are you, right? So people who are low in assertiveness, they might notice something's wrong, but they won't assert themselves into the situation, into the conversation to inform people, right? Maybe they're also low on extroversion, so they're not necessarily willing to even talk to people. And then we look at some of the other traits as well. Okay, but that's a bit of the extroversion there for you as well. Agreeableness. So this is the primary dimension of interpersonal interaction, right? So this is how you kind of talk and connect to other people. You can have people who are high in agreeableness, and we see some explanations or descriptions. So they're very compliant, they're nurturing, they're kind. They might even be naively trusting. They're very conciliatory. So if there's a problem, some sort of issue, they're more willing to reach some sort of reconciliation and agreement on how to resolve the situation, or how to let bygones be bygones, let's say. I'm kind of like lower in agreeableness, so sometimes I'll just let things it's like, nope, we don't need to resolve this, I've made my decision. I'm not on the extremely low end, right? But people who are low in agreeableness, generally speaking, they're not nearly as nice. They might be stubborn, dominant, harsh, skeptical, competitive, and on the extreme ends, they might even be, predatory, right? Like someone who's very, very low in agreeableness can take advantage of people who are very high in agreeableness. Very easily too, right? Because again, someone who's high in agreeableness isn't going to be willing to engage in that verbal conflict of saying no. Like, no, you can't do this right now. You can't do that to me. I won't let you treat me that way. There's a fair bit of differences between men and women on agreeableness. Women tend to rank a little bit higher than men, and there's a lot of practical reasons for that, right? So let's say one of the examples I'll go into for this video is just child rearing, and if you looked at 10,000 years ago, right? I'm not talking about now, right, where life is great and the father and mother can both be in the picture for long amounts of time, right? It's not rare that the father of a child is able to spend, multiple hours every single day with their child over the span of 18 years, right? We can do that because, we have very advanced societies and food is easy to get a hold of and we're generally safe. So, if you go back 10,000 years, well, who's going to take care of a infant, like a 1-2 week old child? It's most likely going to be the mother. And, if the kid is crying, you have to attend to the child, right? Which is what would have happened, I would say even still to this day, right? It's almost like biologically ingrained in people at this point. But men are a little bit lower in agreeableness, and makes sense. Again, you go back 10,000 years ago, and you're in your small group of people, and another small group of people show up. That low agreeableness is part of what's going to help you to defend your own group of people, to protect your kid and your family and your relatives and your friends against another group of people, right? Which is we don't see as much of that anymore, but that doesn't mean that that's not where humans kind of came from. Okay, so that's just one practical reason for why men and women differ in agreeableness. Okay, so agreeableness breaks down into compassion and politeness. So on the left side we have compassion. Again, one of those that's very kind of straightforward, obvious, but compassionate people are concerned about helping other people avoid negative emotion. Now, again, what I was saying about weaponizing agreeableness, related to extraversion, some people are just going to be low in enthusiasm. It's like you can't really help these people avoid negative emotion. It's just kind of in their temperament. They're more inclined to it. But a compassionate person will go out of their way and say, well, hey, so-and-so is sad. How do we solve this, right? So you can almost think of Winnie the Pooh. You have Eeyore, who's very low in enthusiasm. He's always kind of whatever. It's kind of sad about life, but he still goes along. But you could look at the characters in the show, and I don't remember who really invites him out, but I think it was Pooh Bear. Pooh Bear is compassionate in that sense that he's inviting Eeyore out all the time, right? It's it doesn't really matter that he keeps saying no. So that's compassion. Politeness is kind of a relationship with authority, right? So again, unfortunately, particularly in the work environment, a lot of students who, let's say, are low in conscientiousness and industriousness, low in agreeableness, so they're very disagreeable. They're also low in politeness, which is unfortunate. Creates a lot of problems, right? I don't know how new or common it is now, but ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, more and more students have that now, and it might be a legitimate disorder. It might also just be low politeness and low other traits that are necessary for someone who's supposed to be working all the time or supposed to be producing things all the time, particularly in a school environment, right? But your politeness has to do with your varying levels of comfort with confrontation, conflict, or fights. And I mean anything from body language to verbal to physical, right? People who are high in compassion and politeness are probably going to move out of the way of other people as they're walking because they don't want even that level of confrontation. Whereas people who are very disagreeable are, they're going to walk with their shoulders out and they don't care if somebody hits them because they'll have that conflict, right? But, you can weaponize this people's ability to be compassionate and polite and agreeable. Last one, ocean. Yeah, so neuroticism is the last one. Neuroticism is the opposite of extraversion. It's your primary dimension of negative emotion in the big model, right? So things like pain, sadness, irritability, defensive anger, fear, and anxiety. So again, with this one, women are more neurotic on average than men, and there's again very practical reasons for that. Ask any girl what it's like to go out on a Friday night when it's in a dark bar or just at night. It can be really scary, I imagine, for some very biological reasons. And we live in a society now that is much more tame and much more safe, but it doesn't mean that 10,000 years ago, or for the last 100,000 years of human history, that it was always that way. And I would say it wasn't. And that's why that exists in women. They have to have a bit of this bit of fear and kind of distance response to, let's say, men, because it could you just don't know how it's going to go, right? You don't know how the interaction is going to go, so they have to have a bit of a wall up. Whereas men on average are a little bit lower neuroticism. I don't really know why. I guess it just is. And again, just sex differences, basic sex differences, and how the human species just evolved and how things just occurred, right? And it just produced a bit of a higher neuroticism and a higher agreeableness in women. And again, another practical reason related to the example of agreeableness, it could also come with childbearing, right? Like if you're not concerned, like for myself, I'm very low in neuroticism. And so, I'll just brush things off and say, it'll be fine, whatever, like we'll sort it out, right? But that mindset could be a bit negative for, when it comes to raising like an infant, like less than 6 weeks. It's like, no, the baby won't sort itself out. It needs to be sorted out because it's helpless, right? Or social situations, right? So being low in neuroticism and low in agreeableness, very low in neuroticism and moderately low in agreeableness. If there's some sort of social situation that doesn't go properly, it's like, whatever. Like if it has to get physical, then it's going to get physical, and we'll solve that problem when we get there. Again, so just very basic, practical reasons for why men and women differ. Okay, next, so neuroticism breaks down into withdrawal and volatility. So withdrawal is kind of like, let's say something bad happens, you get some bad feedback, or you get a low mark, and you just feel bad about it for like a week, a month, a year, right? I'm very low in withdrawal and just like neuroticism, so bad things will happen, and usually very uncommon that they bother me for more than 3 days. And lately, it's very uncommon that they bother me more than like 3 hours, really. But again, that avoidance or withdrawal in the face of the unknown, the unexpected, the experience of negative emotions. We have loneliness, disappointment, grief, all these kind of things. That's to do with withdrawal. It's just withdrawing into yourself at kind of an adversity, I guess you would look at it. Volatility is kind of your stability and predictability of mood. So we're talking about, I have a little bit of volatility, and sometimes I can just snap, and it just happens in certain situations or with certain people. But some people are high in volatility, and like they're kind of like as soon as something happens, they just go off, right? They just get triggered. That's actually a good meme phrase for that as well. People high in volatility, they just get triggered over anything, right? The smallest little thing could bother them. And, these people can be hard to work around or be around. And so that's finishing up neuroticism, and now I have my resources. So at the top, you'll see a link leading to the personality assessment that I took. My previous lecture was based off, my previous lecture essentially just took my results and I just talked about them, whereas this is much more simplified. You can see the next 2 links just on the program and on the Big 5 as well. And then you see at the bottom the Wikipedia link. And in the future, when I redo this video, I'll have a slide in there talking about in just a few minutes where I talk about how does this practically apply to you. But I would encourage you to, and I'll try to put the links for this in the YouTube video, but I would encourage you to go through the Big 5 sheet that I'll link and self-assess yourself. Where are you on the traits, right? It's very worth knowing. It has helped me so much in my life knowing that, hey, I'm high extroversion, high enthusiasm. Like I need to be around people, right? I need a job where I'm around people. I'm high creativity and openness, hence why I'm making these videos. And I like putting stuff on YouTube, and I like having posters in my classroom. I'm low neuroticism, so I need to think things through and plan for problems and contingencies, right? Especially in the teaching setting where I'm the adult in the room, the only adult in the room. It's necessary that I have things sorted out ahead of time, right? Rather than just the mindset of like, it'll just fix itself. like, or it won't even matter, right? That works at a personal level, but not necessarily when you're in charge of 20 to 30 people, right? So I would encourage you to take the time, look through the presentation, read all the words on there, and try to understand for yourself where you're at and how that helps you to interact with the world. Okay, other than that, have a good day, and I'll see you next time.